have always had compassion more so for the vulnerable. No matter if you're a human animal or non-human animal, I just felt like leave that person or that animal alone, especially if they can't defend themselves. Because growing up, I was a pretty husky big guy, and I felt very passionate about intervening in these situations where it just wasn't going to be a good outcome. So again, coming from humble beginnings, and I also experienced a lot of violence growing up. I seen my first murder at the age of 5. Man, brains blown out in front of me within close distance, and that had a big impact too on my views going forward. I'm really proud that I have been over the years to help redefine what masculinity is, because masculinity is someone that's comfortable in protecting as well as know their own feminine side. You are just basically a human being doing what human beings should do, and having empathy and protecting and doing as much as you can to abstain from harming anything possible. And I'm just very highly alert with my own sensitivities to that, because I am a guy's guy. I like a good vegan burger. I like me to have a good beer, and a good drink every now and then. But you can also do that and participate and be a guy's guy without harming people or animals.
That was Dominic Thompson, a former drug dealer who grew up with humble beginnings and unfortunate circumstances, including witnessing his first murder at 5 years old. After incarceration and becoming vegetarian in prison, he took his second chance and became a healthcare executive turned activist and social impact entrepreneur. He's become a successful vegan multi-sport athlete who's done triathlons and cares about many issues spanning from animal rights to human rights. This authentic and open-hearted conversation had so many layers, with loads of curiosity and exploring different ideas and perspectives on how we can actually show up for positive change in our individual lives. We touch on so many different topics, ranging from food insecurity in marginalized communities, the problems with our healthcare system and prison system and reincarceration rates, masculinity and compassion, his new book deal, Eat What Elephants Eat, and so much more. And it felt like we barely scratched the surface. I hope you enjoy this conversation. Let's get into it. Welcome to the podcast, Dominic.
Thank you for having me. It's an honor, for real.
I am so excited. For the people who are listening or watching, we have purposely not been discussing the things we want to talk about today so we can keep it really fresh, and I'm really excited about this. A lot of questions I want to ask you.
Yeah, and I'm an open book. I can't stress that enough. I love really just digging into a lot of things and topics that can be challenging to some people and that can be comfortable to people. So yeah.
Totally. How are you enjoying the island so far? Your first time in Hawaii?
It's absolutely horrible. I'm ready to go back to Atlanta. No, I'm kidding. It's a beautiful island full of great energy, beautiful people, great food, amazing hikes. And I love the fact that you guys have a lot of different eco temperatures. You can have very hot and humid in one area, and then you have very cool and wet part of the island. So that's pretty, the transparent transition from those different climates is pretty amazing.
Yeah, there's so many microclimates here in such a short distance. You can just 30-minute drive. Yeah. Completely different. And I know it's way different here than it is in Georgia.
Yeah.
What's
Georgia,
it like being vegan in the South?
Vegan in the South is not fun. But I am not a vegan that eats out a lot. So, I cook almost every day. So it's not that problematic. But there are people that choose to eat out a lot and prefer to eat out a lot, which is something we're going to talk about, because we're going to help serve those people with our restaurants that we're launching soon. Yeah,
so when is that? You're going to come out with a vegan restaurant in Atlanta.
In Atlanta, that'll be our first launch, and we have plans to move to a second location in Austin, and then we'll go to other locations in the Southeast, such as South Florida. Asheville is on there too, and a couple other places such as Charleston. But we're gonna move in the next 2 to 5 years aggressively and strong. We were actually gonna launch this quarter of this year, but the pandemic and what's happening with servers and employees and more, it's just very hard to get staffing, and it's supply disruptions, and it's just a lot of things happening right now. It's just not a good time to launch any type of business in that industry, in my opinion. So we're going to launch the first quarter of next year, and I'm really excited about that.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, the service industry and restaurant industry is really difficult in and of itself, let alone add on top of all the things that are going on right now.
Yeah, it's a pretty busy industry and it has its challenges too because of what happened with the pandemic, for sure.
I feel like you are so accomplished. You've done so much and are still doing so much. Like, you got a book coming out, which I know we'll talk about, and just with so many avenues of ventures that you're doing. Can you share about your vegan story, just your kind of transformation story from being incarcerated, your childhood, and to what brought you to where you are today? I would just love to hear that story.
Yeah, well, we got to go way back, and to the audience members, I appreciate you all being here with us, because it's going to be a lot to really take a deep dive on. But it really started at a very young age. I come from very humble beginnings, west side of Chicago, Lockwood and Crystal area to the Austin community. I have always had this big heart and compassion for animals. I was that kid growing up that I would have friends, boys gonna be boys, that would take slingshots and shoot at squirrels or stray cats and stray dogs that was just roaming the streets. And then there was different pit bull fights and a lot of dog fights happening. But I'd be that kid in the middle, like, no, let's leave these animals alone. So I have always had compassion more so for the vulnerable. No matter if you're a human animal or non-human animal, I just felt like leave that person or that animal alone, especially if they can't defend themselves. Because growing up, I was a pretty husky big guy, and I was just felt very passionate about intervening in these situations where it just wasn't going to be a good outcome. So again, coming from humble beginnings, and I also experienced a lot of violence growing up. I seen my first murder at the age of 5. Man, brains blown out in front of me within close distance, and that had a big impact too on my views going forward.
What was that story?
Yeah, it was, my mom, single mother, amazing woman. I love my mom to death. She was working 2 jobs. She was a nurse. It was 3 of us, and she, at times, would need to drop us off at our grandmother's to watch us while she go, what the young kids call today, go get a bag. go get that bag, get that money to keep things on, lights on and bills. But she picked us up from our grandmother. Our grandmother stayed in the Lawndale community on 16th Street. And it was this drunk driver that hit this group of girls. And one of the girls went up at least 10 feet in the air, and he kept going. He slowed down and kept going shortly after. And the gang, the Vice Lords at the time, was right there too in the opposite corner and seen it unfold. And this is back in the 80s. And what people don't understand about gangs in the 70s and 80s, before it was crack cocaine and all these other contrabands or drugs were introduced in those communities, gangs was created to help empower Black communities, specifically similar to what Black Panthers was before being designated as a terrorist group or some type of violent group. And also there was different influences over the years, but the original gangs of Chicago, I can't speak on gangs in LA and in different regions, but collectively, most Black gangs was created to help empower and uplift the youth and communities to be better men. And this was during that time where they seen this hit and run, and they retaliated with automatic weapons and shot up this car, and that was the first murder I seen. It definitely wasn't the last.
Wow. Were you looking through the window or something and just saw it all play out? Oh my gosh, that must have been so traumatizing.
Yeah, but I always been a fearless person, excluding flying. I'm gonna be full transparent. I don't fear anything in this world but flying. Me and you talked about that off record. I do not like flying over a body of water. And I think it's mainly because I'm wired and engineered in logic, and to me there's nothing rational or logic about flying over a body of water in this Airbus metal in this capsule, because we're just not humanly designed to fly. And I have my thoughts and critical thoughts about that. But yeah, seeing that, it would just be the first time I seen a murder, and again, not the last, that would continue to numb me, where it was just becoming the norm. Whether you have friends you grew up with that was killed and murdered, or family and loved ones that was killed and murdered or was part of something like that. It was just a lot of violence I experienced growing up. But here I am, the opposite when it comes to the vulnerable. Like, leave these animals alone. And that was really the start of something that I always been about, trying to protect or be involved in something to help things out in some capacities. But my start in veganism, if you fast forward, I had to go through some challenges and different things. Again, I come from a single parent home, no father around for us to help raise or contribute financially to this family. My mom, it was just 4 of us, including my mom. And you had to sometimes do things and go through and experience things that is going to get you to that next level and get you to that next journey or get past that pothole. And the things I did, I used to be involved in gangs myself. And to understand how that was influence on me, I grew up in a family of lieutenants and generals and some even original architectures of these gangs, very legendary uncles and cousins that they was kind of an influence on me. But then I had the positive of this beautiful, strong, kick-ass black woman working 2 jobs, don't believe in cutting corners, don't believe in complaining, just doing what she need to do for her and her kids. And I had these 2 influences that kind of had an influence on me growing up. And I got involved in gangs, and I also got involved in selling drugs to a level, very high level of kilos of cocaine and stuff like that, that
Wow.
eventually was my demise and landed me years later in federal prison. It was federal prison where I made that connection and decided to go into this new transition of life, of removing myself from harm specifically. And I remember it was like it was yesterday. I was sitting in my jail cell, and I'd never been in and out of prison at all. This was my first time ever being arrested. In fact, I was in college. I was retired from the gang, and that life and this old lifestyle basically caught up with me.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
That must have been really, really frustrating.
It needed to happen because like my lawyer told me that, I've never at that point up until I was going through my legal case and because I wanted to go to trial. It was an entrapment case. It's something that me and my lawyer felt that we can fight on because it was just basically a lot of biases that we felt like we can undo and win. In hindsight, I feel like we definitely can have a chance. In today's age, with so much people paying attention more to the very unfair judicial systems, we may have a chance today. But back then we didn't. You don't go to war or fight with the U.S. government. It's not the people of Hawaii or the people of the state of Maui County or wherever you are. It's not your county or the state or your city versus you. It's the United States of America versus you. It's when you feel like you're a terrorist and an outcast. It's one of the most scary pieces of documents you can see. The people of the United States of America versus you, Ella.
Especially if you don't have the finances to be able to get a really good lawyer.
Exactly. If you don't have a really good lawyer, you're in a lot of trouble when it comes to a federal level. Luckily for me, I was able to fund it, pay my lawyer a lot of money to take on my case. He was a top-of-the-line lawyer. In fact, he was referred by, at the time, the Cochran firm. I don't know if they're still around or anything like that, but he came with high recommendations. But he sat and had a man-to-man, human-to-human, very kind and direct, assertive talk with me, one male to another. And said, this is the first time that any male had this discussion with me. He said, listen, we can go to trial, but if you lose, you're 21, you're not going to be home until you're in your 30s. And I'm a first-time offender at this time. And he's like, you got your whole life ahead of you. You and I both know, this is what's called. And he said, listen, young man, this is what's called karma. I never heard that term karma before. There's a lot of things I never heard and experienced up until that point and going forward. But he said, this is what's called karma. This is the universe really sitting you down with the consequences that you used to be a part of. And you and I both know it could be worse. You have to take, either go to trial, you risk the losing, or you hold your chin up and take full responsibility. And I did. I took full responsibility for my actions. And that was the day that would change my life forever. Like I would not be having this conversation with you and be having this podcast episode if I did not go through that part of my life. And I was, I took full responsibility. They basically gave me, as a first-time offender, this 10-year sentence, 4 or 5 a hard time, and then 5 a house arrest. And here I am in my cell, just trying to make sense of it all. 'Cause I'm young then, it's just like it just made no rational sense to me because I'd never been in trouble. I never had a speeding ticket up until that point.
Wow.
Like
oh my gosh.
Never, ever been in any trouble with the law. And here I was getting ready to finish school and everything like that, and now I'm serving federal time. And it was then and there I decided to get on my knees in my cell. I'm not a religious person. I didn't grow up religious at all. I'm more spiritual. But it's pretty incredibly humbling when you're in your darkest times, the way you call out for help for something more powerful than you. And the universe, I got on my knees and I prayed and just trying to reach answers and really connect. And I was in that vulnerable position trying to receive some type of answers through my calling and energy. And everything pointed to this childhood memory when I was 8 years old. And I remember like it's yesterday, my mom was feeding us chicken wings. And I was always a finicky eater, picky eater. And you're a mom, you know how boys can be sometimes, or even girls. And I hated chicken wings with a passion. And I'm looking at these wings at this time. And I'll always pick through the tendons of the wings and just eat a little bit off the tendons. It was just disgusting. And I just remember looking at the wings. Then I looked up at my mom. And then I looked back at the wings. Then I looked at my arms. I looked back at the wings. And I was like, I don't want it. And I pushed it to her. She was like, what's wrong? I was like, they look like little bitty arms. I don't want them anymore. And this is in the 80s. It's kind of like, my mom was like, wait, what?
What are you talking about?
What the hell are you talking about? You got to eat. Like, you're not gonna, what are you going to eat? And she's like, I was like, I don't want those arms. And she was like, And it's kind of hard, and it can be intimidated to tell a single mother that busts her ass to put what she can on the table. Like, we living in very poor. We was poor. No doubt about it. We was poor.
Yeah.
And but she told me, well, you're not gonna eat. My mom was always a no nonsense, straight assertive, straight shooter. But I'm a chip off her block. She always taught me to speak my mind. And I was like, well, then I'm not gonna eat. And we had like this standoff, but then she eventually compromised and went to the store to buy me fish sticks because it was kind of like masking this, the anatomy of that animal specifically. It was easy, and again, you have boys and most children, what are we talking, fish sticks or chicken nuggets, prefer that than something that's tied to like a bone structure. And then they start asking you questions like, where does this bone come from? Where does this animal come from? Kids know, it's the intuition. So this memory popped in my head like a light bulb right there in my cell as I'm, praying. And it went off like, I was like, I get it. Everything started making sense. This unknown messaging went in my head like I knew, like a light bulb. And then I created this mantra right then for myself, that if it requires harm, then no, I don't want to have anything to do with it. And right then I just denounced eating meat any time. Like I became instantly right then and there vegetarian, because back then vegetarianism was integrated similar to veganism. I didn't know about the dairy industry, but I stopped eating meat. And I made that promise to the universe I would never eat meat again, and I never looked back. And that was close to 21, 22 years ago. Yeah.
Wow, that is crazy that it took you being in a prison cell, and like when you're being there by yourself, all you have are your thoughts.
Yeah.
That's when that transformation happened for you, and you're seeing not even just about like animals, but you're just saying like, oh, the overall arching theme is like do no harm.
Yeah.
Wow, that's really powerful.
Yeah, and I always tell people, whether when I'm traveling, giving my own speaking engagements and more, that I feel like most humans think they know themselves, but the ones that really do know themselves when they are at their darkest moment and hit rock bottom, or those that are serving time and for incarceration for whatever reason, or soldiers off at war. Because when you're close to death and you're just at that point, that breaking point, you really make sense of a lot of things and decisions you made up into that point, and then you realize there's only one way to go up, and everything pointed in this direction of do no harm. And I know a lot of us that are in this lifestyle of plant-based, vegan, whatever you define yourself as, don't talk about how the spiritual impact, how the energy is just ascending from there. As the universe took me, I was supposed to be in there for 5 years. The universe got me out of prison early, and everything has been like a uphill, beautiful ascent. Wow. Ever since then.
How long did you serve?
I served about 3. Yeah.
And what was it like eating vegetarian in prison? Like, did you like have to tell your prison guards like, "Hey, I'm vegetarian now"?
Yeah,
like,
I'm sure so it's probably definitely different these days. You can be classified by religion and more, but back then you didn't have that choice. So I would trade my carbs with my cellmates. I mean, not my carbs, I'm sorry. Trade my meat-based protein with my cellmates for their carbs. And I would eat a lot of complex and simple carbs. And they used to look at me like, "You sure, Dom?" I was like, "Yeah." It was like, and they're like, that's that crazy. That's that weirdo. You know, that's where the name of my first company, Crazies and Weirdos, came up from, because they used to think I was crazy and weird not to be eating meat. And I'm like giving them whatever meat that we was being served on the line, giving it to them, and they're like, "I take it," and they're like, "You want these potatoes? You want this pasta, this rice, and these veggies?" They don't want that. And I was like, "Yes, give it to me." And this is before the documentaries, this is before the book. It just was intuition, and I didn't know what the hell I was doing. I didn't know if I was going to wither away or not. I just know that whatever this experiment I'm going through, this is what the universe is telling me to do, and I'm never going to be a part of anything that was alive again.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow, that's fascinating. The whole time because I have known that you ate vegetarian in prison, I'm just picturing that it was like a thing that was able to be catered to you.
No.
Obviously, I don't understand, or I didn't have a clue. But
Yeah.
that's really, really cool and fascinating that you're like literally trading your meals with other people, and they're like, "Okay, you're weird, but okay."
Yeah, you're weird. If that's what you want to eat, then go ahead, sir. And so what happened next over the next couple months, when I entered prison, I was this big husky guy, kind of a lot of inflammation, overweight and stuff, just from the good life, you know, the drug dealing good life in general. And that inflammation was gone. That overweight was gone within like 2 months. I went from being like over 250 pounds all the way down. At my lowest, I think I was like 187. You know, my abs was showing. I became stronger. I became one of the top inmates that were out. We was on a compound of maybe over 1,000 inmates, and we would have what's called lift-offs, and I was one of the top 10 strongest guys in there. Like, I was killing it, from benching over 405 to squatting easily 500 pounds to deadlifting like close to 500 pounds to deadlifting over 500, like it's nothing. So yeah.
Were you surprised by that result? Like, because obviously you didn't go into it with that kind of expectation.
No, I wasn't really surprised, because again, this is a young Dominic, and we didn't have access to the supplement industry. We didn't know what all these predatory practices and bias propaganda that the supplement industry pushes out there even to this day. So it's not like I was conditioned to believe I need like anything between creatine to protein powders. So I wasn't surprised, but it was just, I always been a strong guy, but it was just an interesting time, and it was and I tell people this all this time. It was the closest that I felt to becoming like a real superhero. Like, I mean, you just feel different.
Yeah.
You sleep better. You feel different. Your confidence is the energy. I just can't explain. You really feel like you're at your highest peak of a human being as far as health-wise.
And this is not even you getting high-quality food. You're
Exactly.
getting prison food.
I'm getting complex carbs and simple carbs, and I wasn't definitely getting enough vegetables, but this is definitely just. I would have to. So there was a time where I wanted more vegetables, but they wasn't serving it to us, but they were serving it to the guards, and so I would pay whoever was working in the kitchen to serve the guards on their lunch breaks through stamps, extra to get tomatoes and bell peppers and stuff like that.
That's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, because that's the only way we have access to it. And other assets too was on commissary, so I would spend all the little money that. My mom didn't have much money to send me. No one. A lot of people turn their back, and I didn't have much money on commissary, but the little money I have, I would spend on like vegetables, yeah, for sure, and fruit, a lot of fruit.
I bet that must have been even more weird to people that like that's what you're bringing into to prison.
Versus like spending you have the opportunity on commissary to buy chips, ice cream, all types of stuff, processed foods that is just not healthy for you. But yeah, here I was just my body was just like, I was just flowing organically in a sense that my body just knew this is what it needed, and I was just buying it.
So then take me to the part where you get out of prison and you're like this transformed person.
Yeah.
Like where's your mindset there?
Ah, man, my mindset was actually different when I got out. Sure, it was a great thing, but and people don't understand when you come out of it being locked up for a while. Like, I've been through different levels of security in prison, and my most high level of security was when I was 40 days in a hole and 40 nights when this coward hit me from behind with a chair, and long story short, it was a fight that occurred, but it knocked me out. But since I wouldn't tell him or be honest about who hit me, because I wanted to deal with him in my own manner, the way that I was conditioned to believe was a great, with violence, you respond with violence, different mindset back then. But that put me in the hole. Hollywood always get prison inaccurate. It's not this happening over here or this happening over here, But one thing Hollywood has been kind of accurate on is when you go to the hole, where you have no ventilation of air coming to you. You have no light coming to you. And you got these multiple steel doors. So that was the most that I've been through. But it made me stronger. But with that being said, when I re-entered society, it was a different feeling, because even seeing cars go by would make you nauseous and dizzy. Hearing music and you just have a different sensitivity to things. So I was more like militant. I was more like angry at myself, at the world. I didn't want to hear any type of music that I grew up on, from rap music to nothing. I didn't want to see no type of nonsense. I was just like grandpa, more like an angry grandfather.
I mean, can you blame anyone for getting out of prison, especially if you stayed in what you said, the whole, when like you said, Hollywood obviously does depict that, and whenever I see that depicted in movies, it literally looks like the most miserable thing that you can go through. It is the most miserable thing. To just be, not even to have any kind of view, you're completely by yourself. Like, just the way that it's like depicted and the way you described it sounds like something that you wouldn't want to wish on your worst enemy.
I say to this day, I wouldn't wish going through what I went through, and most people that experience incarceration, especially the first time offenders. You have people that repeat and repeat. By the way, I've never been back since then.
Yeah. But, I think that's clear.
Yeah, that's clear. But like I tell most people, I wouldn't wish that on my worst enemy. However, you had to make the best of your situation. Sure, there wasn't jobs in there. There wasn't training or education in there. That shows you what we do with our taxpayer money. That shows you how very wrong in many capacities the multi-billion-dollar prison and judicial system is not doing anything for humans specifically that truly want to rehabilitate. I made the best of my situation by reading a lot of books and writing and getting my body back in top shape. But even though I wouldn't wish that on my worst enemy, if I had to do it again, I would, because it made me a better human being. And I tell people that all the time, because there's no telling where I would be right now. Like, it just made me a better human being and appreciate life for what it is. Just the simplest things, by having a casual conversation with you, to me, is a beautiful thing. And some people take advantage of life, not realizing life is pretty special.
A lot of times it's your lowest moments that, like, in the moment it feels like, why is this happening? How could this happen to me? Like, it's never going to get better, and I can't see any good coming from this. And then later you look back and you're like, oh, that had to happen in order for me to get here.
For you to really hit some peaks.
Right. And that doesn't mean that, I feel like it's such a delicate thing, because, like, for someone who's gone through something like sexual trauma or like a child loss, like, how could you say that?
Yeah.
You know, like, that had to happen. So I feel like it's a very layered thing, but there's so many instances within my life where it's like, I look back and I'm like, in the moment I was like, this is the worst thing ever. And then later you're like, I'm so glad that happened.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. You're right. Everyone deals with their traumas and challenges and experiences different. And I always tell people, I teach this to people, that, listen, there's only one way you can go from that trauma or that experience, and that's forward. Staying in that one position is going to continue to be painful, and you definitely don't want to get pushed. And when you have the wall against your back, you can't go no further. So you just got to go up and forward.
Yeah. So you got out of prison and you have this, like, tough mindset, and, like, just to see where you've become now, where you're, like, a passionate animal rights activist, but also human rights activist. And do you feel like a lot of that is largely in part to, like, what you've experienced in prison?
Absolutely. It was based on my own experiences growing up, what I seen the system for what it was. I had a chance to do my own unpacking and educate myself in many capacities, and see truly how different biases are placed in society. Whether we talking people on the left to people on the right, there's just a lot of people in very powerful positions to really shape the canvas of what people sometimes do go through, because we are bound to certain systems and industries in order to participate, to be sustainable and live. So I had a chance to really learn a lot too from my own cases, my own case in itself, from the sentencing guidelines being very unfair practices being pushed off on most young black men, because you won't find crack cocaine in, like, suburban areas, specifically in America. You'll find powder cocaine, which is what I got indicted for, but you'll find crack cocaine in the 80s in most communities of color and marginalized communities. And those sentencing guidelines were created and architected by people such as Biden and more individuals very unfairly to punish first-time offenders, it don't matter, very highly, where they feel like crack cocaine at that time was more potent than powder cocaine. It's actually the opposite. You know, and when you think about the logic, I mean, you're watering down powder cocaine with baking soda.
Yes.
And then you have this powder cocaine that's is more potent, but you're going to sentence somebody that's caught with the poor man's version. It just makes no logical sense. So I took what I learned and understood from that and growing up, and just applied it and try my best to educate people and make them aware that this is what's happening in these industries and these communities, and especially with the judicial system.
Yeah, for sure. It's interesting how a lot of people kind of brush over that, like, Biden was a big part of this 1994 crime bill.
Yeah.
Yeah, but there's so many layers to it, because there has been improvements, but it doesn't seem to have gotten far enough to where it's almost like a little too late. Too little, too late.
Yeah.
And while there are things that definitely needed to happen anyways, like the First Step Act that happened, which, like, helped people to be able to revisit and try to get revisions, basically, so that they could get out of prison early.
Yeah,
a lot of people did.
Sentences,
to be able to get out of prison early. A lot of people did get out of prison early, but still
people serving time that haven't gotten out of prison, especially when it comes to the marijuana laws and stuff. Now that marijuana and THC is more commercially, socially accepted, and you have more states adopting this revenue practice of legalization, and they're making a lot of money from it. But you have a lot of people from back in the day still serving time or still have that felony on their record. But then you have this big 98% of people, from venture capitalists to local governments to international governments, so many different parties and special interest groups making money now for something that these people back in the day, this is the only way they knew how to make money. It's a hustle, and there's the original plant pushers of that with that. And it's definitely, it is unfair in some capacities too.
Yeah, absolutely. There is the Equal Act that did recently pass this last September in the House with near unanimous bipartisan consent, but it hasn't passed in the Senate yet. So that's hopefully that passes. But like I said, it's like it feels too little too late, and it's like really unfortunate how many people that impacted.
Yeah, a lot of communities been affected. The war on drugs is something that a lot of us from our timeline would never forget, because and those that do choose to forget it or don't know it, you don't really become passionate or activate your own activism yourself until it has an impact on your house, your home, your partner, your brother, your uncle, your father. When you start seeing these people being missing and going through some challenges legally that they just have no way out of, and you see the very unfair practices of the judicial system, it gets personal. It gets very personal.
So what would you like to see change? What do you think would help this system that has so many problems?
I think we're definitely moving forward with, I would like to see federally more policy change, blanket, right? Because you can have one state where this record might be expunged, or this person, like someone like me, my gun rights are done. You know, I can't bear a gun because I have a felony. Not to say I'm pro-gun and I'm trying to get a gun, but just in general, you lose your voting rights, you lose all these rights as a human being as a first-time offender. So I think a lot of that stuff needs to be, in general, if the whole judicial system needs to be dismantled and broken down and rebuilt very fairly, and we need to have truly people that are not being lobbied with special interest groups to continue to impose things that just simply are unfair to certain groups in certain communities. For sure.
Yeah, the lobbying power of industries really messes things up.
It does.
It really, really does. Like things that could potentially or mostly be fair and free, it ends up messing things up because of power and money and lobbying abilities. So I agree. I definitely think that the amount that people can lobby or interest groups can lobby definitely needs to be changed for so many different things.
Money definitely influences and buys new policies and leaves behind a lot of people that simply cannot fight these policies, don't have the resources or even the advocacy. Like, for example, even what's happening with most Americans don't know, when you eat pork, most of the time, you're supporting environmental racism, because most of that pork is sourced from the Tar Heel country of America, the Carolinas, where these factory farms are strategically placed in these poor rural communities of color. And they don't have the resources, the advocacy, or the power to fight big factory farms from putting this there. And what's happening, those lagoons are spilling over into the communities from those pigs and those hogs, and they're becoming the highest demographics being admitted to the hospitals for these
cancers,
everything from asthma to sinuses and more. Even UNC did a study where they swapped the outside of the house and even the kitchens to see feces.
Wow.
Feces on these homes.
Yeah, I think a lot of people don't even realize just how much animal poop there is in America. Let's talk specifically America, because that's what we're relating to right now.
Sure.
So how much that animal poop runoff is going into the rivers, that's running down and emitting so much not good things. I don't know the right term for it, but the things that are potentially causing cancer and the cancer belt, essentially.
Sure. The
higher rates of that.
Especially when you digest it, you're digesting carcinogens and stuff. And the beautiful thing is the science is finally catching up. You can't, I'm science driven, and the data is there. Mm-hmm. Men lie, women lie, humans lie, but data does not lie.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, yeah.
I mean, there's so many things that could be changed. Something that really comes to mind with me about the prison system is the reincarceration rate and how hard it is to get a leg up when you get out.
You do. You're discriminated against, for sure, between big employer groups to more. It was, look, honestly, it was worse then. I feel like there's been progress.
Yeah, there has.
I definitely did. There's a lot of companies, from small startups to even corporations that simply don't care if you made a mistake. I mean, obviously, if you made a violent mistake where you like someone that is definitely a evil person and you took a life for whatever reason, that's different. You know, there's different crimes out there where people just simply won't forgive you. But those that the war on drugs, and those are drug offenders and people that's just was brought up in these communities to just try to make something out of nothing, because they wasn't even given the opportunity, because there's not, back then there wasn't the structure, the infrastructure for employment, you know, and this is the best way they knew, or this is the way some people was conditioned to believe this is how you can make money. A lot of these companies are a little bit more forgiving now too. So we definitely made progress. I don't want to dismiss that.
Yes.
We for sure have made progress, for sure.
Even in the like law and federal level, like in the last administration, it was Kim Kardashian. Obviously, she can't take like full credit, but she was part of helping facilitate like prison reform to help. I think it was something about helping inmates who got out of prison to be able to have a ride to work.
Yeah.
Something about that. So little things like
lot.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think about, actually, I took a sociology of women's class in college, and it was my favorite class in all of college. It was this professor, Dr. Leonard, who passed away now, but she was super passionate about women who had gone to prison for killing their abusers, and how, I'm not sure about the law now, but at the time, back when I took this class, the law was that if a woman was up against a man and she didn't have a weapon, that was considered equal combat, right? Like self-defense. But if she had a weapon and the man didn't, then that was not considered self-defense. Whereas we all know that no matter the situation, like no matter how strong a woman is, mass majority of the time, if you don't have a weapon to defend yourself against a man, like you're gonna lose.
You're definitely gonna lose.
So so she was really passionate about helping these women get out of prison and not have to have the sentences that they had gotten. A lot of them life in prison for things like defending themselves. Or even if they're in like a life or death situation where the partner or the abuser, I should say partner, but the abuser is like threatening the life of them or their child that they're with, and they try to escape and the abuser brings them back, and they're literally so hopeless, and because there's not at least at the time like systems in place to help them, then they end up
different remedies and solutions,
so many layers. So she ended up taking us to a prison to meet some of the women and these inmates, and we met this woman. And she was like the sweetest woman, so nice. And she had been doing her studies. She graduated college within prison, and like kind of what you said about like reading books, and had gotten so accomplished. And after we left, everyone was like, that lady was so sweet. She was so nice. Who was that lady? And she's like, that was Leslie Van Houten. She was one of the Manson girls. And it was just so great. She had been in prison her whole life, and she's like very, very, very old now. And that's not to say anything about, you know, my thoughts on her sentence or her whatever, but it was just so fascinating to see like what transformation you can make in prison. And so I think you're right. There has been adjustments and things that have helped, but we still, it sounds like, have a long way to go.
No, we do have a long way to go, and that's fair. And look, people make mistakes. People sometimes get vacuumed and brainwashed into different things, and it's tough to be. It's a thin line too. Like, we live in such a culture now where people are easily canceling people and judging people for every little thing. You can say, hey, Ellen, the sky is beautiful out here. It's sunny. And there's somebody like, no, it's not. It's technically purple. Or this blah hamba, like these very angry people that don't want things to be at peace. Some people really thrive off of chaos and disruption. And you definitely want to stay away from those people. But with that being said, people do make mistakes. People do change.
I mean, look at you.
Yeah, look at me. I was not the most pleasant guy you want to be around back in the day.
I know. It feels like there should be more opportunity for not having to have a sentence that you did however many decades ago or however long ago, like still be on your like record for everyone to see every time you try to apply somewhere, where it follows you around everywhere. Yeah, it's hard. It's hard to know like what the right answer is.
Yeah, it's definitely a complex topic, but I think the amount of money that we spend in other areas, we move digital currency around like it's nothing, right?
Yeah.
I mean, thinking that we don't have the money for this stuff, we do. And that whole concept of we're in debt and we can't make things happen, we see what we just was able to fund through what we went through in different capacities. Some of that funding can be allocated to better programming for people that do make mistakes in those scenarios. They shouldn't have to go through a hard time, and they should be able to go through and have options to really want to become a better human. And I get it. Some people feel like, well, that's not fair. You can commit a crime and come out with a diploma or a degree. But
no, I mean, the goal should be, if someone that has that thought process, like, you should be punished forever. Yeah, but like, I feel like the thought process should be, hey, we want to help you so that your life is transformed and that you aren't, going back to those same old ways. And like, you can't expect someone, I mean, we all have personal responsibility. That's a huge part of it. But like, wouldn't we want to help? I don't know.
What do you expect them to do? Like, once they're hit rock bottom, right? What is the option for that human being?
Yes, exactly. There's I think a lot of people don't relate, and so it's hard to empathize, right? And that's why stories like yours are so powerful. Sorry, what were you gonna say?
Yeah, no, and I agree, and I hope people receive what we're talking about with an open heart and kindness. To realize you shouldn't have to go through what I went through or anyone else went through to understand that we all are humans. We all trying to figure out this big, beautiful, complex thing we call life. We make mistakes. We all come from different backgrounds. I say it all the time. Some people hear me say this, but there are, close to 8 billion people in this world that's going to wake up tomorrow with 8 billion different points of views. Mm-hmm. That's diversity, and that's beautiful in itself. Beautiful. And we can't be all uniform with our ideology. Whether you're on the left, right, middle, you have to understand that people just have different opinions.
I so agree. They should. I so agree. Nuance is so important, and not like labeling people like, oh, you disagree with me, so you're this. Just like try to understand each other. Yeah,
try to and receive it with an open heart. Don't be rooted so much in your own biases because of your lifestyle. And I think that's what happens with so many people. People are, if they practice a certain lifestyle, they're going to be biased and just dismiss you or try to shame you or just feel like, well, your way is just wrong, and we don't receive that with open heart, and we just need to be more kind and receive that people just live different lives and have different opinions, and they should.
Mm-hmm. And now a few words from our sponsor who helps make this show possible. Whenever guests stay in our home, they are always amazed after their first night of sleep and ask where the bedding is from because it's so incredibly soft. I tell them it's from Buffy, and they're pleasantly surprised to hear the bedding is sustainably made from eucalyptus. The bedding industry has a huge impact on the environment, but Buffy decided to change that. Their products are made using only renewable and recycled materials, which makes them as soft on the planet as they are on your bed. Their debut product, the Cloud Comforter, is covered in super soft eucalyptus fabric and filled with fluffy fiber made from 100% recycled bottles. It has over 18,000 5-star reviews, and it is hands down the best comforter I've ever slept with. The Cloud Comforter is ultra breathable, softer than cotton, and it keeps you at the perfect temperature to feel cozy without overheating, and my husband can attest to this. Plus, it's hypoallergenic and also machine washable. The average down comforter harms 12 geese, but Buffy's comforter is cruelty-free. It feels even softer than down while keeping about 50 bottles out of landfills and oceans, and eucalyptus uses 10 times less water than cotton to grow. So use my code ELLEN for $20 off orders over $80. You can try a comforter in your own bed for free. If you don't love it, return it at no cost. I mean, where should we go from here? I feel like you can continue to, how about continue to tell me a little bit more about after you got out of prison, like what brought you to becoming vegan?
The chunk of, there's definitely a big space there. So when I got out, I had to serve house arrest. And, I had to get back on my feet, and I had a curfew. My curfew had to be in the house by like 7 p.m., and I wasn't able to leave the house until like 7 a.m. And that time that I was able to leave the house was either needed to be searching for jobs. Well, first of all, the halfway house, because I was in a halfway house for about 6 months. It's the transition. But I was able to get back on my feet and get into healthcare. So my first position, right when I got indicted, I had an entry-level position working in healthcare for a CBO office of a health system, doing revenue cycle and management and collections. And I was able to really clean up the AR to a point that I was averaging 1 to 5 million in revenue cleanup for this health system a quarter of the year, that I made such an impact that, and I was fully transparent with them when I got indicted, because I was arrested and gone for 5 days, but then I got out on bond and had to go through the pretrial and all of that. So I was out, but I needed to still be productive while I was dealing with my case. And I went to my directors and was honest with them, but I made such a impact with them. 2 women, by the way, this is going to sound biased, but I got to tell you, to me, and this is me being honest and transparent about my own bias.
Your own bias.
Women are the best kick-ass leaders in the world. Like I have such a big heart for women in leadership roles, women in any powerful role of influence, because women just, to me, based on my experience and what I'm going to tell you, you're all going to appreciate this, see things differently. And sure, we have a small percentage of guys that have that empathy, you know what I mean? But most men don't really have that empathy that's just organic and nurturing like most women. And these 2 women I went to, that was my bosses. One was a black woman, one was a white woman. Regina, may she rest in power right now, and Kim as well. I told them what happened. I was straight up honest with them. And they come from challenging backgrounds too. They have their own little story. And they said, well, listen, we're going to keep you. You're going to work here until whatever happens, and you just, your case. But if we are around in our positions, when you come home, you have a home here. You have a job.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, what a difference that made.
It was a big difference, because when I got home, I definitely looked them up, and they was there, and these women had to fight with HR and the legal department, and they had to always go to the C-suite of executive because here I am, a felon, right? But they're fighting like, this is not a violent felon. This is a situation that happened. He was transparent. He was honest. Yeah. And it took them like 6 months to approve this, but I got approved. And because you can't, one thing anyone can say about me that had an opportunity to work with me in corporate America, like I still have some of those relationships. I'm a really effective worker. I'm really productive. Yeah. And I took that opportunity, put it in a headlock, and I shot up and ran to the point that I was negotiating their workers' comp claims, and I escalated, started working for their sister company and started negotiating physician contracting and then hospital contract. I just kept elevating in healthcare from this one opportunity. I was given a second chance.
Yes, you took your chance and you ran with it. And
without a college degree, too.
Right.
Without a college degree, excelling while running different markets in the region that I never looked back.
And you also proved to all the people who were skeptical of you that these women fought for you for, like, look, I'm good for it. Like, you basically... They vouched for you, and you completely proved it. Wow.
They vouched for me, and that just shows to tell you, anyone that you want to take a chance on, and that's a good person, and they just need. Life is sometimes about who you know, and they can help you out. These women took a chance on me, and I took that opportunity and didn't let them down. Yeah. You know what I mean? And I excel. And to this, one of them, is no longer living. The other one's super proud of me. Like, she's seen this young guy excel and take on these opportunities. And so a former co-worker of mine was told a VP at this bigger on the other side. So I work for a huge health system called Vanguard. And then this other colleague went to this other huge healthcare company and was like, you need to get him. He's great at physician contracting. He understands contract law and all of that. And my ex used to always, I feel like I was a lawyer in a different lifestyle. I just understand contracting. I understand business development. It's just a very complex system. And then you're dealing with DRGs, revenue codes, and Medicare laws that people simply can't comprehend. And I knew it like the back of my hand. I could tell you so much about the health system, from public health to revenue to preventive care. And I could tell you so much that will blow your mind. And I knew this stuff. And so this company flew me down, like, hey, And I'm skipping a little bit over the fact that I had to deal with house arrest. So I would do my job and come home and be on house arrest. And it was a recycle. I couldn't go to the gym. I could do nothing. I would just do push-ups in my place. I stayed. I was able to live in a 3-bedroom apartment on the west side of Chicago. And sure, it was in the hood, but it was my place. You know what I mean? And it was my first place making a living in healthcare. But we didn't have social media back then, right? We didn't have like dating apps either. We had none of this stuff. We had Blockbuster Video.
Yes, I remember. I definitely remember Blockbuster.
Yeah, we just had Blockbuster Video, and it was so funny because my mom at the time rescued this little fur ball she would every year go to St. Thomas Island because her husband is from St. Thomas. They met at work and they got married. He waited until I came home to marry her, which was nice of him.
Wow, yeah.
Because I walked her down the aisle. And so this little fur ball that she rescued, and she would collar this little dog into the bed, and he had chihuahuas, and those chihuahuas was like evil. Imagine Gremlins, right? So you got Stripe and they're ganging up on Gizmo, right? And she was like, fighting with him. And he's like, well, that's her brothers and sisters, and this little dog just didn't get along with the chihuahuas. Chihuahuas are very different. Let's just be honest. They're different. Yeah. And she was telling me about this problem. I was like, well, here I'm on house arrest and I could only go to work, and it's not like I had no life, like in no social life in capacity. And I said, well, bring over. I didn't know what type of dog she was going to bring over. I was like, how about I raise her? Because I raised a couple of dogs growing up. And she's like, I said, I'll keep her for a couple months till she get older. She's a puppy. And she was like, okay. So she brought her over on a Saturday, and my mom opened the door. I was like, where's she at? She was like, right here. And I looked. And this between her legs was this little bitty fur ball with the biggest pixeler eyes that you can imagine that Disney can create, and something like this, these big, beautiful brown eyes. And I looked, and I scooped this little dog up, and I just started smiling. And it was the first time my mom seen me crack a smile since coming home from prison. She felt like prison took my soul, and she started crying right instantly. And I was like, it's okay, Mom. And I was like, what's her name? And she was like, she named her Soka out the dance, the official dance of St. Thomas called the Soka. And I was like, all right, I'm going to raise Soka for a couple months. I give her back to you. Never gave her back. We fell in love. This is, for everyone out there that follows me, know that was my fur daughter, Scruff McFly. That was her online persona. But this little bitty dog, this beautiful little soul, is what kind of made me view things even more critical with respect to animals. Yeah. People don't really understand just how intelligent animals can be. Yeah. They can read you. You can read them. Me and her would communicate. So this little beautiful princess would wait on her dad. Come over there. She'd be excited. And here we were both on house arrest. And watching our movies. She'd be like, this is great, Dad. We'll like wrestle in the bed. We'd be on the couch watching movies and sliding through my wood floors, like my ghetto wood floors. And it was just me and her. I'd get down and wrestle with her. And we just created the best friendship. That was my best friend. I lost her last year, but
I'm sorry.
She was, so I try not to cry every time I talk about her, but that was my best friend. And here was my best friend. I flew down, going back to the whole healthcare story, this VP flew me down to Tennessee because now I'm off of house arrest at this point. I did 2 years of house arrest, and me and my lawyer went to the federal judge and showed that I'm a role model citizen. And he was like, I always knew you had it in you. Very fair judge. He was a very fair guy. I think he wasn't biased on either side. But he spoke on. He's like, I knew you always had it in you, and he commuted the rest of my sentence. He was like, you're not doing 5 years of house arrest. You're done. Everything's paid for.
That's awesome.
It was a great, and I appreciate him for doing that. And so here I am now in Tennessee being interviewed for this bigger position to make 6 figures, to run Tennessee and Georgia. And the VP was blown away by me and offered me the job on the spot. And I was like, I got to go home and talk to my kid, my fur kid. She's the decision maker. So I flew back home and I told her, she's like, all right, Dad, let's do this. She's like, let's do this. So I packed up my U-Haul and put on my truck, and me and baby girl drove to Nashville for what was going to be the start of a whole new career. Here I am making six figures, running part of Tennessee and more. And so I was in healthcare for years, 15 plus years, 15 years. And what happened next was an acquisition that eventually took me to Atlanta, then another acquisition where my boss at the time asked me to go to New York. I didn't want to go to New York because I'm from Chicago. I'm from a big city. And I feel like New York was Chicago on steroids. I just didn't want to, I feel like I was going backwards. And I was comfortable in Atlanta. Working, I had my own office. I had my own gym within that building of that office. And I was not bad for a guy, a felon.
Yeah.
Making six figures. I mean, look what I came from. This kid from 5-year-old seen his first murder, humble beginnings. And now I'm making good money. And he's like, no pressure. I want you to go up there. And at the time, my ex, she had a position. She just got offered at a firm in New York. I met her when she was in law school in Georgia. And she went back up there because she used to intern for them. And she was like calling me, like, she was on a lot of pressure because she was doing these real estate deals. Her clients was Bank of America and Chase, and these multi-$100-million deals. She'll come home at 4:00 in the morning to her little small Wall Street apartment. And she's like, I need you up here. Babe, this is not going to work if you don't come up here. She's like, what the fuck are you waiting on? And I was like, what do you mean? She's like, I'm telling you to get up here. Your boss is telling you to get up here. She's like, and she just straight up gave me an ultimatum. She's like, listen, this long distance is not going to work. If you don't come up here, we're just not going to work. I need you up here. Your boss needs you up here. I was like, all right, let me talk to Soka, which was her, her mom. Her and Soka had a great relationship, and Soka adored her. So that was Soka's mom, and I'm right here with Soka, like, all right, your mom needs us, and my job needs me up here. She's like, fine, let's go to New York. So I put my truck in storage, and we got a U-Haul, and we was off to NYC. And here it is. We settled in NYC, me, her, and my ex. And again, me reflecting on what I've been through. Here I am standing in this doorman building, making good money, and my partner making good money. I was like, life ain't so bad. This is crazy. Like I was given a second chance, the universe, right? And I took that opportunity to continue to be consistent and be fair and kind. And that was the first time, Ellen, that I was able to really exhale, to really like I spent all my 30s dealing with the judicial system and trying to get on my feet. And here I was, like, I think I was 32 at the time in New York, looking and reflecting on my life. And a childhood friend of me, he called me up. He's like, you should get on this cool new app all the cool kids on. And, you're always talking about veganism and stop eating animals. And you should kind of blog it. I was like, what is blogging? Yeah. He was like, yeah, blog it, man. I was like, I didn't know these terms. I was like, he's like, you'll figure out, just download this app called Instagram. I was like, Insta what? This is when Instagram first came out. Yeah. And I was like, all right, dude, whatever, man. He was like, trust me, man, this is the future. I know you. He knew it. And I downloaded this app, and I was just like, people doing selfies. I was so against this. This is like early on Instagram when people was using filters, and it was chronological order. And if you had 3,000 followers, it was like 30,000 followers. Yeah, you got 30,000 followers, like 300,000. It was different times. Way different. Then. People didn't think social media was going to be sustainable. And I created an account, and I just myself, I started talking about what I knew of animal agriculture and the healthcare system that I worked in, and how preventive care is important and what you eat is important. Early on in those captions, and my account just took off organically because we didn't have very many vegan men at that time, especially vegan men of color. We only have the stereotype back then was of a vegan male was two types. Both was white guys, either in middle age, ultra endurance athlete like Rich Roll, And by the way, me and Rich are very close, and we came out around the same time. But I was the anti-Rich Roll. Yes. I was a former gangster, no nonsense. Totally. Straight up, do the size, outlift you and your mama together. Like, just no nonsense. The opposite, and also the opposite, the other stereotype was either like some hippie, psychedelic, pothead guy from Australia with blue eyes surfing. And I was the opposite. Yeah. And the community accepted me and I just grew.
I
from
remember
that.
I've been following you for ages.
Yeah,
because my Instagram was very similar, like just happened very organically. I was just sharing my life, like giving my kids fresh fruit.
And that's the most beautiful way when you just being yourself.
Yeah, I wasn't trying to be anything.
Me
just
either.
being myself.
Yeah, still not trying to be anything, and it just took off.
But it's so different.
It's
now,
so different.
Social media.
It's so different now.
Yeah.
It's a business now. It's driven by so much, including capitalism and more. But we do have to make money, and I get it. But I thought, what better way to use this platform now than to raise more awareness? And that's how I became who I became, just more active and going to disruptions and fighting for animal rights and human rights. I used my platform because at that time, I did have the largest vegan mail account at that time. And I thought, what better way to do that, just to educate people so much on what I know.
I'm sure you influenced a lot of people.
I did. It was crazy.
When did you become vegan?
So I became vegan around the time I transitioned to New York. Yeah. And New York, listen, as much as I was against going to New York, I was like, fuck New York. I was just like, didn't want to do it. New York has its pros and its cons, but New York definitely made me who I was. It activated the activism in me. It's just something, just like you guys have this energy on the island here. New York has a different energy on their island, on Manhattan. Different. It's just a different energy. It's truly the concrete jungle for sure.
So you becoming, having a larger following on Instagram, people following you, loving what you're about, and how different, like you said, like a total different stereotype of veganism. Yeah. What are your thoughts on like veganism and masculinity, and even like masculinity and compassion? Because I'm sitting here listening to you talk about your sweet little innocent dog and how much love you have for this little tiny creature, and kind of the stereotype of like masculine, like what's masculine, is just not that. Yet here you are, so masculine. Yeah. And how could anyone refute that? So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think masculinity in itself has been hijacked by a lot of different personalities and influencers and different entities and industries. You got to be a guy's guy. You got to destroy, or eat meat and be this certain image of this guy that's just sitting up, shooting up things, or eating a big ass burger and steak.
And even like now it goes to the like eating the like liver and the even balls and different organs and just like eating it raw, and like that's what a man's man is.
Carnivore diet and all of that. Like that's what a man, that we're going back to our days and our origins, and that's just so much misinformation and ignorance in itself. To me, I'm really proud that I have been over the years to help redefine what masculinity is, because masculinity is someone that's comfortable in protecting as well as know their own feminine side. I think women can have masculinity and feminism, and men can have masculinity and feminism. You are just basically a human being doing what human beings should do, and having empathy and protecting and doing as much as you can to abstain from harming anything possible. And I'm just very highly alert with my own sensitivities to that. Because I am a guy's guy. I like a good vegan burger. I like me to have a good beer, and a good drink every now and then. But you can also do that and participate and be a guy's guy without harming people or animals.
Yes, sure. and it's like almost shifting the mindset of like, what does masculinity even mean? Because really, truly, when I think of masculinity, I think of a protector, someone who doesn't need to show off to prove their masculinity, and to be like, look, I can kill this innocent animal and look how manly I am. Whereas you're like, I'm gonna do activism and show people the injustices in the world, both animal and human. That you're seeing day to day in your life from your own experience, even, and like. That's so masculine, and I think that's one reason why so many people flocked to you, because it was like, wow, this actually makes so much more sense. Yeah,
and I do think a lot of my experiences have been able to enable me to activate that true compassionate side of me. Like I said, I've always been compassionate as a little boy, but there's nothing more sad than someone that takes advantage or becomes a bully and destroy something or part of something that simply is doing absolutely nothing for this beautiful place that we all have to share called home. Because I don't know about you, I don't have $1 million ticket to go to Mars or to escape to another planet.
No,
I have no desire to go space travel. You know what I mean? Like
right.
I want to take care of home, and I want us to be more alert and to do what we can to save this planet for sure.
And there's a lot of just like walls and barriers, both in things like the prison system that still needs so much improvement through our systems, and then also with the animals and how much there's so much facade and lies that are just told so much to help people feel good about the animals that they're eating. Like, oh, look at this happy cow on this milk carton, and you know,
the propaganda is real for
it's
sure.
so real, and it's actually fascinating to me how there's this growing movement of people thinking that veganism is propaganda, and that you know, it's actually the meat industry that's just trying to be honest and tell you how great their food really is, so good for you.
Yeah, money influences. You're right. If you follow the money of the articles and the marketing, you'll see that there are lobbyists and special interest groups definitely trying to push this certain agenda and propaganda. Because why would you want to? First of all, you can get enough protein from plants. You can definitely feel fulfilled. You can definitely thrive. You're not going to wither away. I'm a pretty solid dude, you know. And there's a lot of people like me in our positions, from Drew to more people and other friends in our community, that shows that you can be a human being and simply be sustainable, healthy, and strong as fuck on a plant-based diet without harming or digesting something that's going to take you 72 hours to get out your system anyway. Nothing logical. If you look at your hands, our physical attributes, as far as designed through natural selection, this is made for picking.
Fruit.
This is not made for clawing.
It's not made for tearing apart animals.
Nothing, exactly. And you don't have the digestive system to digest something live. You showed me a human being that can take a live animal with its heart beating and the tendons still and digest it fully within 24 hours. And I said, you're right, we're apex predators, we're carnivores. You can't show me that. We need man-made tools to trap them, and we need man-made tools to cook them up, cook up these carcinogens. It just makes no logical sense. Or show me a human being that can breathe salt water, go grab a grouper, a tuna, or a salmon, come back eating it without cutting up the skin. Then I said, yeah, we're made to digest this marine life. We're not.
Yeah.
So.
Absolutely. And I also think about things like what's hidden from the animal, like from us, about the animal agriculture industry, like slaughterhouse footage and stuff, and how, you know, when people are saying, oh, animal foods is so nourishing for us, so good for us, but then they're not showing the process of an animal being dismembered and slaughtered, because no one wants to see that. You know, there's a difference between like a hunting page, it's like, look at me, you know, the whole masculine facade about like hunting. But then there's also this other level of like, there's a reason that you're not like, look at this animal, I just sliced their throat and taking the skin off them, because it's not appetizing to us. And we all know it's like, that was an innocent animal that didn't want to die. Yeah.
And there's nothing natural about buying a piece of steak or anything from a grocery store that you didn't have to get your hands dirty. You have to cut up yourself. And you need man-made tools to get it from that source to your plate. And again, listen, no judgment to those of you that do eat meat out there. You know, it is my hope that you do consider the fact that there's really nothing natural about it, but also the impact it has on the environment. And hopefully you can do better and make better decisions. Because I used to eat meat, but, you know, I don't anymore. You know.
Right. So when you're speaking about veganism online, like, who do you imagine that you're speaking to, and like, who are you trying to reach specifically?
I don't try to reach anyone. I just walk my walk, and if someone comes into my tribe or energy, hopefully I am influencing them. Like I was telling Lauren earlier, I'm at a point in my life, I attract my tribe, and my tribe finds me, and that's just such a beautiful synergy. It really is
like an energy. The energy you have about yourself, you attract it.
Yeah,
totally. And,
it is. And they'll find you, and you'll find them, and that's what's been happening for a while now. Like when you force it, and you're running like a business model, it's gonna fail because it's not authentic, and you have to be your authentic self.
So when talking about problems within our system in America, and then also food related, can you address or talk about your thoughts on like food insecurity in marginalized communities, and if that relates to plant foods at all, or where do you think we should go from there? I
think more so we're at a point where food security is a global thing too, not just a local thing here in America specifically. And what the pandemic has shown too, how globally food insecurity is, where we're feeding livestock, we're taking our resources from our biggest and most powerful and richest nations to feed into this system. And we're supposed to be the smartest animals on earth, but we're kind of like the dumbest to do this, right? Because we truly have enough resources to feed the world.
We do.
But here in America, I think it's close to over 40 million, which is defined food security in America as people that go to sleep at night. In this day and age, post-pandemic, food security was differently defined pre-pandemic, but post-pandemic is someone that's hungry, going to sleep hungry at night. I think it's close to over 40 million Americans now that go to sleep hungry, and that's a big number. But we have money, digital currency, to fund other projects, but we can't even take care of our own. And historically, you have everything from food deserts to unfair business practices, from redlining and more, where you have these stores and you don't have access to grocery stores where that single mother, one or four, would need to travel to get access to fresh produce and more. But that's what's happening. And now with this disruption in the supply chain and more, food security is spilling over into other communities, not just marginalized communities, a lot of communities out there specifically. And even more, people don't realize there are military families relying on the food from food pantries and other nonprofit and organizations trying to feed them because they don't have enough money to feed their families. Military families, people that are fighting to protect us in some capacities, which a lot of people don't know that. It's becoming a bigger issue where food in itself, and it's really mainly due to this pandemic too. It's just getting more and more worse out there. And a lot of people are simply not making it in life, and we need to be more sensitive to that and to do what we can to really address these issues, because it is a policy change. We need to be more aggressive with these people that we elect, whether you elect somebody on the left or you elect somebody on the right. You need to really pressure them to be more involved to change these different policies.
So what are your thoughts on some policies that need to be changed?
A lot of different, as far as reallocating money in terms of creating more sources. And I mean, look, inflation's at, I think, the all-time high it's ever been. We can control some of these things. Stop letting these big farmers and big industries have an impact on exactly what we do as a consumer specifically. So we can affect policy change at that level to make food more sourcely available. We can also have some more aggressive practices to stop this price gouging and stuff like that, and also make food more accessible and more affordable, not driven by one set of group of big five grocers specifically. We need to open up the playing field too, and also even more promote better practicing in farming specifically. The farmers too, they're going through a lot. They have to tighten up their buckles too. Like, it's just a very complex system that we can change, but we're so driven on capitalism that we're not making any changes specifically to that.
So I don't know if capitalism is the problem per se. Personally, I feel like there's a difference between like true free market capitalism and like crony capitalism, and problems within capitalism like powerful lobbying industries through like the meat and dairy industry and the processed food industry. So like for me, I personally would like to see like these lobbying powers to like kind of fade away, and then shift things like food subsidies. If we're really going to subsidize foods, then we should, instead of subsidizing foods that are making people unhealthy, like, from what these powerful lobbyists have influenced as with processed foods and the meat and dairy industry, why not subsidize foods that are actually going to make people well? Because
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. And also we have to be more aggressive with education, because people don't realize when you go inside the perimeter of the most average grocery store, that's where it's expensive. Processed food is expensive. Make a processed food, it's like, why to eat a frozen TV dinner, whatever frozen food is expensive. Going out to eat is expensive. But if you stay outside the perimeter and eat more whole food, plant based, stay in the veggies and fruit aisle, it's actually not that expensive.
Well, I think for people who are
in comparison.
But I think for people like calorie wise, they're like, I only have $3 here. Am I going to buy a McDonald's burger to feed my child? or a head of broccoli.
That's very real.
Yeah, and so like the food subsidies thing is just so out of balance because like we do see so many people, we have so many sick people and unwell people in America in general.
Yeah.
And then add on top of it, if you don't have the finances to buy healthy food, like this is where we really need to be changing something.
Yeah.
So
yeah, you're on the go. That $1 burger, 99-cent burger looks pretty attractive for sure. If you don't have access to the local grocery store, you're on a quick 15-minute lunch break, you're working for Amazon, whatever, and you're like, damn, I just need something to eat. The last thing in your mind is eating healthy. For sure.
And it's just more difficult too.
It's definitely more difficult.
You're going to get higher calories, become more satiated from that processed stuff.
Yeah. And then you're also going to be one of those demographics eventually being admitted to this health system, this bloated health system that's just could be really corrected through lifestyle changes and preventive care. We got to get back to preventive care.
Preventive care, I agree.
Yeah.
I think a lot of times it's kind of like, oh, universal health care is the answer. But I think there's so many other things that we should change first. Like we were just talking about, if we're going to uproot, because I think a lot of times people try to compare us to like, certain European countries that have free health care, but we are so different to those countries in so many ways that most countries are not like us, that we have so many different diverse cultures with different ways of living. And then on top of that, there's factors related to in the healthcare system, you don't know what you're paying for. You don't know how much certain things are. Like you go to a hospital and they won't tell you how much something costs. And actually I had a friend visiting from another country and she got hurt and she went to the hospital, needed an MRI, and she's like, well, how much is this going to cost? I don't have insurance. And they're like, we can't tell you that.
Yeah.
That's astounding.
So that's my wheelhouse. They don't know at that level, at that position, that admitting clerk don't know what that DRG or revenue code is going to cost.
Yeah.
Open heart surgery can range anywhere between $50,000 to $100,000. They don't know that.
Depending on what they got to do when they
depending
get
on
in
the
there.
health system, the region, what they have to do,
Yeah.
your age, a lot of factors in that place. Medicare laws, localities, there's so much to consider contractually. The payer, what they have in agreement with the hospital, it's just a lot of factors.
There's so many factors.
So, of course, that admitting clerk is not going to be able to tell your friend or my friend or anyone whatever is happening with them when they're being admitted, what is going on. Because they're just not qualified or skilled or educated or in that position to say, hey, yeah, I know what's happening. That goes bump up to a different level of that health system per se. But that goes to show you that, listen, there is money. These health systems and these payers are making money off of sick people. So when you go to universal health, I'm actually pro universal healthcare. When you go to universal healthcare, you eliminate that whole human psyche of wanting to cut corners and make money and to monetize off of sick people. We should not be monetizing off of anyone sick. Healthcare is definitely a human right to me. And if anything that we've seen in this pandemic is the fact that we all should have access to quality healthcare, because it's just going to make a better and healthy community.
Right. I agree with you that we should all have access to it. It's more about like, is this the answer? And a couple things I want to ask. So when you said about the front clerk can't know how much something costs, do you feel like though there are certain things that could be a lot more transparent? Like there's some hospitals that would be like charging $200 for ibuprofen.
Yeah, so that's a policy change.
Right.
Exactly.
That's actually something that happened in the last administration. They did a policy change at a federal level, but I don't know if they have to, how much has to happen on like a state level, because obviously that plays a role.
Sure.
But I think that plays a big role in regards to the cost and things being bloated. And I think you're right. There's a lot of corruption in regards to money and everything like that. But I guess when I go back to things like universal healthcare, I look at the healthcare that we have in America and compare it to other countries and the healthcare they have when it's government run and when it's not like necessarily driven as much by something like, if you're just going to say a blanket statement like profit, I feel like there's more layers to that. But when you look at America, almost universally, people are flocking here to get our healthcare than the other way around. Like you're not going to find someone from Texas going to Canada for healthcare because we have such a free market system. Like there's a reason why America has like some of the biggest and most amazing inventions and technological advances. It's because the reward is so great. And when you take away the reward of like making such a big risk, doing such a big risk to like invent something like life-saving technological equipment for surgeries or a drug that is life-saving, right? Things like that. If you take away the reward being so great and it all just kind of like, it's not about profit, then you lower the quality. Like I look at personal things when they're like government run. I look at like the DMV and the US Post Office and the quality of service that you get when it's government run versus something like UPS that's privately run. And they're like, look, I want people to choose UPS because I'm all about business and I'm about trying to provide the best product and service. And then there's like incentive. It's like a natural desire to like do your best when it comes to things like that. So that's kind of my thoughts.
But I think a lot of people fail to realize, because if you do go with a universal healthcare model, you don't eliminate the free market. The free market is still available. People in Canada still have the option to go to elective if they don't want to wait on their surgery or whatever they're going through, because we do live in a society where all humans, especially in the Western region, are number one impatient. People want what they want right now, and that's the problem. That's people are like, oh, I need to have a surgery, and look, surgery is important, but there are definitely some things that can wait a week or a couple of days where you're not a priority, but people they expect that right away, and that's some of the talking points of people that are opposed to universal health care are pushing out there. And you're not going to eliminate the free market if you have the money to go pay a surgeon sooner than later to have whatever you need to have done, or even to get access to more medicine quicker than waiting 24 to 48 hours. I kind of blame the whole business model of Amazon. People, when they click on that button, they expect the same day to get service, or even restaurant, fast food, casual, everything. People are just, we live in a society where people have no patience, no patience, and it's spilling over in industries and communities, including healthcare. So free market is not going to be eliminated; it's still going to be there. But then you have universal healthcare, and this is going to make a better community, because that little boy or girl that might have some type of virus, like, whatever, whether we're talking COVID or something new in the future, COVID 800, I don't know. But when you have, and so they may have a different family background where their mom and dad don't have a HMO. They may have a PPO or a POS or a free market or self-insured, where they may not have access to the same quality health system. But you integrate that in that same community, that school system, that kid can have an impact, whatever they're carrying, on your kid. But when you have quality universal health care, everyone's going to be protected in some type of umbrella, where you don't have to really worry about little things like that. So the model works, but the free market still would be there. So
do you think that it should be like raising taxes to cover healthcare for all, but then keep healthcare and a lot of practices within healthcare privatized, not necessarily government run, but it's free for everyone? Well, but it's not necally free. Like, it's not free because someone's paying for it. So,
well, let's be honest. The whole tax code and the tax issue in general was probably the first thing that left or right should have dismantled and presented itself before that overhaul of healthcare years ago. We had to really address that, but also be very transparent about, like I said, this digital currency, this borrowing money from here and there. Yeah, there's a lot involved with taxes, and that's our money as U.S. citizens. But we do have resources more than we know it, and we can fund these things, or even reallocate to a different part. That instead of a very bloated, super bloated military.
Actually, I was going to bring that up because I agree with you. There's one factor
we don't need new F-16s every year.
Or new tanks every year. So much of our tax dollars gets allocated towards military funding, and I definitely don't consider myself an expert to know how much money we should be allocating towards it.
It's the biggest budget, I believe.
It is the biggest in the world, because we kind of act like the police of the world. We have our military infiltrated everywhere in the world. So
our
when we compare ourselves,
in every country.
So I'm with you. If we're gonna do more things like making it more affordable and available, like more types of services available towards all, because right now you have the ability, if you have emergency care, you're not going to be denied service no matter who you are. But let's talk about things like surgeries and things like that. There's a few things I want to say. One, like, I think it's hard for us to compare to like another country that it works for, because they don't spend so much money on the military. So I'm with you. If we're going to go that way, let's at least,
because our military is protecting them anyway. So.
Yeah, I know. So they don't have to spend the money.
Canada don't have a big military. It's like, America's going to protect us over here.
But we have to spend the money on that. So like, it's so hard to know. Like, how are we to be like, oh, just pull out? Because really, there's a lot of people who hate America, and there's a lot of threats there. So there's not about Canada. I'm not talking about Canada, but you know what I'm saying? Like, we're infiltrated a lot of places.
Yeah, we're Big Brother
to protect. For sure. Yeah, so I understand that aspect, but That's why it's hard for us to just compare to another country that it works for. So there's some people in Canada, we're just using Canada as an example, who really likes their healthcare. And then there's some people who really hate it, because I've definitely spoken to people who are like, it takes 2 or 3 months to get a surgery that I really need. Whereas in America, you could just go and get it right away. And part of that
or it might be that surgeon. And part of that, not to interrupt you, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
But part of that too, because I talked to those same people.
Yeah.
It's because they have a special doctor they want to go to. It's just a lot. You got to consider those factors.
Yeah, there's always layers and factors for sure.
Layers,
and I feel like this is such a complex topic.
It is.
Like
it
a
is.
whole
It
episode.
is. It's totally
But
complex.
it's really fun. I actually find it so fascinating, because there's so many details that's hard to understand, and I want to unpack it and really understand it, because there's layers to it, right?
Yeah.
But I forget, what was I saying? I was basically just mentioning that, like, it comes at a cost. If we're all paying higher taxes to be able to do this universal covering healthcare, and the government decides what you can pay for or not, that's when you start having delays in things, because they have to decide who can get it, how many times a month, how many patients can they take per thing. And because we are already like so in debt, and because the hugest factor is that we're the most unhealthy nation, we have the most obesity, the most diabetes, the most heart disease, the most prescription drug use by far. Like, I was actually looking at the stats. The amount of Americans that take prescription drugs regularly, it's significantly higher than any other nation. And so when you factor all that in, I think it's like, the idea is nice, but I'm just not sure if that's necessarily the first thing we should do. Yeah. I'm not like against it. I'm not like, definitely not. I'm more just like, I think there's other things like subsidizing healthy food, like you said, preventative care, that I think is like definitely where we should start first.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, because you're just putting a Band-Aid. Even if you have a universal health care, you're just putting a Band-Aid of a bigger problem where we have to get to the root of the problem, which is eat healthier.
Yes, and we have such a crippled healthcare system. It's total sick care, and it's just like we rely on it so much, so many people having to go all the time. And if we could prevent that, we also are one of those nations that very rarely do any kind of natural alternatives. You go to a regular hospital
holistically,
it's like, this is it, drug surgery.
Drug surgery.
Whereas other countries aren't like that. So maybe, but what would you think would be a good way to shift that? Policy-wise.
Well, policy-wise, we probably need to be rewarding more medical students to go more into holistic care. One thing is what I've been seeing a lot, though. There are a lot more holistic providers coming out, and coming. These med students are practicing and opening up a more holistic approach. But you're right, we are driven off of drugs, and food is really medicine over what should be prescribed as a drug over medicine. And don't get me wrong, Western medicine and modern medicine in general has definitely saved a lot of lives and has been very influential in the human race thriving in different capacities. But we do and we should always look at more holistically the approach of holistic medicine before anything that we are conditioned to think in black and white that we learned in med school. Just take this pill for whatever symptom that you're experiencing. That it might not even be a symptom that just probably needs tweaking in your diet.
Like medical doctors are not taught this in medical school, and this is something we talk to the plant-based doctors and physicians about all the time. They're like, look, and actually Dr. Clapper is trying, I was talking about him about this with him on the podcast, that he's like going into universities and teaching this, that look, there's preventative ways to help your patients, and actually it's going to help them so much better to thrive and not have to need to rely on medication. That's not to say that medication is never going to be helpful, but just to see like a balance that some other countries seem to do better than us. And
I remember 10 years ago we probably had like 2% vegan doctors, and now it's like so many damn vegan doctors and plant-based doctors.
So many.
And so that goes to show you, because even then we was talking about like we need more vegan doctors and more RDs and nutrition, just clinicians that are plant-based and focus on food being the medicine. And look where we're at today. And the same thing what Dr. Clapp is talking about. We can take that same business model as a community that we're involved in and start applying that with the holistic approach. We can get there, just like we have thousands of vegan doctors now, and we can get there now where we have a lot of more holistic doctors with the same type of approach.
Right. Yeah. Wow. I so agree with you. So on the same page there. It would be great if we could see some, like, I don't know if policy change is the right thing, but when it comes to medical schooling, like there is actually even corruption within lobbying
Of course.
powers within that. Do you know much about that? Like being in the
Of course,
healthcare?
it's always going to be influential. In fact, a friend of mine I was just talking to the other day, even it goes down to the medicine and animals and stuff. Like there are committees that approve of if you have the financial means to, and this gets into student loans and how unfair and some of these predatory practices these banking and the institutions kind of make you take out these massive amounts. There are people with $300,000 in debt for student loan.
It's such a problem.
It's crazy just to serve a community and just to, you're going to school to be, in a way, consider a public servant to try to help better your community by being a provider, to just be there, kind of the liaison to trying to heal whatever issues they're going in. But you got to go into debt. 300,000 and that is kind of
I feel like
unfair.
a lot of times though there's this notion that like everyone needs to go to college to be successful, like it
That's not true.
because in the beginning, back when college was getting really popular, our parents were like, oh yeah, you go to college, you get a job right away. As soon as you go to college, if you graduate, you're guaranteed a job. And then everyone's kids started going to college, and it was like, oh, everyone has a degree, and now it's not as valuable. Now you need a master's for it to be valuable. Now you need a PhD for you to be more
I actually
likely.
know people with PhDs that don't have
That
pretty
still
good
don't have
jobs.
jobs.
They have shitty jobs.
Yeah, and I think it really depends.
Yeah.
It depends on the field. Like if you're going into
Yeah.
PhD within a job that just doesn't really have a high demand for
Sure.
a job,
Yeah.
it's just something that you have to consider if it's worth it.
Yeah.
And so I think it would be good. I definitely want to encourage my children to just do what they feel is right for them and not be like, look, you all need to go to college to be successful
Yeah.
for some kind of egoic thing of like, look, my kid graduated college. Instead, it's
that
kind of
business
like,
model is outdated,
Yeah.
and I think it's true in itself to show that you simply depends on what you're doing. Going to a school to be disciplined and to learn and to be amongst peers that have information and professors that have experience is definitely valuable. I'm not taking that away, but there's definitely things in the world you can do without requiring yourself to go to an institution. There are
Right.
very successful people that don't have college degrees and that are killing it.
Absolutely, yeah.
For sure. And one thing too that's the new business model in corporate America that I have been seeing, 'cause I'm still tied to that community in some capacities, is a lot of these employer groups, whether small or large, are going more so off of experience. Long ago are the days of if you have 10 years experience but no degree, you can't get that position. They're like, no, you have the experience. That's equated. In fact, that's better than having a degree specifically.
Totally.
And there's still some that would take a risk if you have a degree, because long gone are the days in some capacities like, well, you need to have 10 years experience in this degree. How do you expect me to get the experience if you ain't gonna give me the chance?
I know.
You know?
I know.
How? You know?
It doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
It's like you're going round and
Yeah,
round in a circle,
yeah,
and you
yeah.
can't reach
Those
the
are
point.
outdated practices, and there are more companies more compassionate and looking more for candidates that simply want to
Like
do
you
their
look
job.
you look at those two women that gave you a chance.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I wonder if your view of women stems from seeing how hardworking your mom was.
It does.
Yeah.
I had some pretty kick-ass women in my family, including my sisters, my older sisters, and more. But in general, like even my team, I surround my team with women that work for me. I just feel like women, and again, this is my own bias, I don't deny that. I just feel like they go beyond the call to duty to really get to the problem and the root of it. Like a healthcare provider, my PCPs growing up, from my pediatrician to my internist, you know, if you have a rash here or you have something that hurts here and muscle here, they want to rule out. They want to just see, like, they do take a holistic approach. Most of the time they do. They want to really try to find a solution versus like, come back in like a couple months. If it hurts, then we'll do an MRI. Like the
just
typical
slap
average
on more and
guy.
more things that cost tons
Exactly.
of
Or
money.
okay, here's a painkiller, versus like, no, I want to get to it. And most of the time, again, probably going to get shit for this, but I feel like women do go beyond the call of duty versus the average male doctor that probably would in that sense.
Oh, that's an interesting.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, again,
You're like, I'm hearing you say
it's
I'm
not
gonna
a
get
blanket
shit for
statement.
this.
Yeah.
I know, but I'm hearing you
Yeah.
say I'm gonna get shit for this, and I'm like, yeah, I don't think so. I really.
Yeah.
Then you said, I'm like, oh, okay, maybe somebody will.
Yeah, if you look in your own life from everything, so it's just women just have it's just part of your DNA to nurture and want to really research and get and really try to solve something.
Interesting.
Yeah, that's just my experience from the women I grew up in and worked for. So,
our experiences shape
yeah.
a lot of how we view the world. I mean, you have such a unique life experience coming from growing up in a hard situation. Let's just say something simple like that, and then being incarcerated, understanding the prison system, and then working for the healthcare industry and being a passionate vegan and caring about, you know, marginalized communities. So you have such a unique life experience.
Yeah.
So, I mean, just kind of rounding out a little bit, because of all your experiences and the passions you have for, like, specifically, let's talk about human rights of, like, people in marginalized communities, what would be like a couple of the biggest things that maybe someone listening could do, or something that you would like to see change either on a policy level or just like on a broader societal level?
I think we're now at the point that we need to understand, and we're talking within U.S. I mean, because policy can be globally, and everyone is in a different region and have their own shitty elected officials, but I can only speak on where I reside and this is in America. I think we're now more than ever realize just how important it is to be really independent thinkers of the fact that whether you're talking red MAGA or blue MAGA, right wing, left wing, they're the same chicken.
The extremes either way.
Yeah, these people simply don't have your best interests at heart, and it's really about amplifying your local communities and also really holding at a local level these people that you do decide to maybe vote for and elect, and put them more accountable, because the highest office in the position in America, sure, they have influence, but the bigger problems are the senators and the people in the House and stuff like that. Those are the ones that actually are writing these laws or pushing this agenda, and it's usually backed by lobbyists and all of that. And it's sad because it's really no simple solution, you know, to this gridlock that we have in D.C. specifically. These are simply people that are just don't have your best interests at heart. And with that being said, you should probably be more kind and open and empathetic to your fellow citizens and neighbors versus these pieces of shit that really don't care about you. You know what I mean? Like, whether you're talking about John Doe or Jane Doe, realize that you all in this fight against this system that really don't have your best interests at heart. They don't.
Yes, I think a lot of people know that. I don't know if I would say like none of the people who are in office don't have our best interests at heart, but a lot of times there's a lot of corruption there. So I agree with you
think
there.
Like 99.9% don't have your best interests at heart. They're really influenced by big institutions and lobbyists and more industries is what's really shaping America.
Yeah.
But the beautiful thing, the silver lining, not to make everybody depressed, but the silver lining is the fact that social media has helped people with bigger platforms, whether we're talking the Rogans of the world or the Ellens and the Doms of the world, or anyone with a platform, is making and putting pressure, like you're actually countering and fighting mass media with social media and having influences on these micro pockets of people that are not going to just sit and take it and follow the lead of this agenda and this propaganda that's being pushed.
I agree. There's so much propaganda.
Yeah, it's a lot of resistance, so much propaganda. But there is a fight, and you have to make that decision. Are you going to be on this side of the fence or that side of the fence? And I just wish more people come together to realize that independently we're better to fight against these people in these powerful positions versus divided, because they are trying to cause division. Division is very real.
The division is intentional. It's absolutely intentional.
Division is very intentional.
People don't realize that if we really do come together, we are so much more powerful than they try to make us realize. They try to act like we're so
they want us to be divided
and don't have any power, but we have so much power collectively. Yes, and so I think a lot of people get discouraged because they're like, "Look, what can I do? Like, as far as like government differences, it's very difficult to make that much change, like on a personal level. Other than like what you're saying, voting for what you believe is the best. It's going to help help other people. But I like to also look at on an individual level, how can we help through our own dollars, through our own decisions, in supporting companies that are helping people in poor communities.
Dollar influences, consumers influence, for sure. What you buy with your dollar has a big influence in different ways. There's definitely things you can do as a consumer to have that.
Yeah.
That
what do you suggest? Do you have any thoughts on like specific organizations that people can support? Or things that they can do on a personal level?
I think one of the most things you can start by, and you have to identify your why and what you want to see change. If you want to see climate change addressed and you want to see a better environment, and to help that, it starts with your diet. It starts with your own education and stuff like that. If you want to see better policy change or have influence in healthcare, it starts with maybe making phone calls and gathering Facebook groups or creating your own org and community to help fight and to hold hospital systems accountable, because a lot of things are affected by Medicare laws that comes from the government. Specifically, if you want to see other changes to more access to grocers and farmers, get more local farmers be supported, like putting money back into your local community with local farmers over going to a big store like Whole Foods or a big chain specifically. It starts right there in your own ecosystem. So there's little things you can do to really help thrive and really make your community. You have to think about your community locally first before you're thinking about domestically and then internationally.
Yeah, it can be easy to just like put your hands up in the air and be like, well, I can't help on a wider, bigger level, but then kind of just forget the people right in front of you that you meet on day-to-day basis, people who are in need.
Your neighbors.
Yes, your neighbors, people that you come in contact with. If you're at the grocery store and you notice a single mom who's struggling in some capacity, like help them out if you have the means to do that.
Yeah.
And buy
local all the time too, like those local businesses.
And actually that's something that the pandemic has caused a lot of issues with, because the rich just got richer and the small businesses really suffered through all the mandates and the rules.
This is why a lot of us are very angry, because a lot of small businesses, from our friends and family to us in general, was crushed in so many capacities by what happened the last couple of years. And I can't stress it enough. It became personal, because these are people livelihoods, and they have to rely on what? I mean, the people got to pay rent, mortgages, and more, and things being unfairly shut down in some capacities. Even to this day, there are some things happening that I just don't agree with.
Right. Yeah. It's really heavy to talk about all the different things that need improvement. Like you said, healthcare, and so many people suffering, not getting the healthcare that they need, and the reincarceration rate. And
welcome to life.
I know. Sometimes you could just be like, I wish that, you could solve all the world's problems.
And we all do. Most of us do, but a lot of us really don't. And that's the biggest takeaway, is that you got to realize, again, there are some people that simply don't care. And that's fine. But we're not going to be able to convince everyone to get on board with just being a decent, kind human being. There are definitely some people that thrive off of disruption, narcissism, and the world being in chaos.
So you're a realist or an optimist?
I am just a human.
I'm a human.
Yeah,
You're like, I'm both.
I'm a human. Far as I'm definitely leaning more towards being a realist, in the fact that as optimistic as we want to be, it's just simply, look, we're never going to see a complete vegan world and stuff like that. I'm just more realistic, because human beings are wired to let you down. Yeah,
I definitely lean more towards optimism.
Sure.
But I have a lot of realism within me, as well, that I try to look at situations with a realistic point of view. At the end of the day, I'm like, but optimistically, it's going to get better.
Yeah, and there's things in different areas you can definitely be optimistic about, and even manifest. You know what I mean? But there's a lot of other things that simply can't be out of your hands.
Yeah, my husband is like you for sure. We're going on a date tonight, by the way. Well, I wouldn't call it a date.
So I don't have a date.
Not a date. We're just going on a friend's date.
No, I know.
A friend's date.
But I'm just letting you guys know. Here I am, a lonely guy, a single dog dad. Hey, put your application in. No, I'm just kidding. No, but we're going on a date tonight.
A quadruple. Andrew and I, you, and then you have a friend, which I'm really excited to meet, and it's going to be really fun. I'm sure we're going to delve in way more, because Andrew's a realist like you, and he's so fun to talk to about all these conversations. Sure. So can you talk a little bit about being single? Because I know that's something you talk about online.
That's a whole different podcast.
I know, but we
could talk a whole. We honestly could talk all day about. Yeah, so I am single. I'm what I define as self-partnered. Just like I had a kind of organically went against resistance with the masculinity thing. Like, I'm kind of like, in my own way, organically, and I say this humbly, kind of redefining what it means to be single. It's okay to be happy and single. You don't have to have a partner per se, or be, because a lot of us are, again, we've been conditioned and wired to believe that you need to have a partner or people that are now practicing multiple partners or to have that companionship. But there's companionship and love in yourself, and you can certainly thrive and have fun by yourself. Whether you're taking yourself to a movie or dinner by yourself, or going up to hike on one of these beautiful trails by yourself, you can find truly peace and fun and just a beautiful experience by yourself. But you have to know who you are. But there are also people that are wired to need to be dependent on other human beings, and I'm just not wired to be dependent.
Well, I think your message is really powerful, because I think there's a lot of people, maybe specifically more often women, but not always, kind of feel this sense of like there's something wrong with them, or like everyone's pressuring me.
Yeah.
And so when you give this outlook of like, look, what I've heard you say, like partnering, is that how you say it?
Self-partnered.
Self-partnering, and the way that you explain like going on hikes for yourself and loving it and finding that beautiful, like there's such a mindset involved through the way that you choose to like love yourself and not have shame involved in like what you're doing.
Yeah, you're gonna miss out on the experience just because, don't miss out on that great movie. Like, go take yourself to the movie or stream it or whatever, or and sure, there's pros and cons to that. There are times that you do want to have that companionship, but don't settle. And that's where I'm at in my life, where I've been single now, happily single, for like close to 6 years, I think, 5-6 years. And I have met some amazing women that would have been amazing partners, but it's not them, it's me. And the key here, though, men and women, all you guys listening to this, be transparent and honest with that person or people or where you at in your life about you. Don't lie. Don't say it's me and you against the world when it's not. Like, just be honest about where you at in your life. And it's okay to be single, but still to have that experience of different companionships if that's what you want. You know, and it's really key to starting off with a foundation of friendship before anything. That's beautiful.
All right, so one more thing that I really want to get to before we finish this podcast is, can you tell me about your book deal that you have coming out?
Yeah, it's such a surreal experience. Like, never in a million years, if you told me as a kid I'm going to be an author on one of the biggest publishing houses in the world, I would have told you, no way. Like, me, what am I going to talk about being from Chicago at 5 years old? So if you told me as a kid, but
Wow.
It's so surreal. Like, and I don't think people understand the very intense process that's involved with a book deal, like a real book deal, in terms of the proposal that's presented to these publishers. Because you're writing a micro mini book that includes market analysis. It could include sample chapters. It includes the arc and more. And I was able to be a part of that process where we got a pretty great book deal.
What's the book about? What's it going to be called?
So the book is called Eat What Elephants Eat. It's actually coined off of my food company that most of you may or may not know, but we have one of the most amazing food companies, startup food companies, where we teach people how to eat plant-based. We have RDs and food coaches on staff that take you through this amazing, very simple onboarding process, from whether you're a family of 4 to a college student or more. But our mission is to make plant-based eating not only accessible, but more importantly, affordable. And this is part of that arm of that food company. So we're going to talk about everything from recipes and food and cooking to the whole foundation of redefining what plant-based food is, to your transition to how I arrived at veganism. We're going to talk about a lot of stuff, and you're going to learn more about me, from my origins to even my involvement in social justice and activism and more. So it's a really, to me, and what the publisher we deem it as, is truly like a documentary in a book. And it's going to be a really beautiful experience.
That's really awesome. Are you going to touch a little bit on your vegan transformation as well?
Because we're going to talk about all of that. We're going to talk about the transformation,
which we didn't even get into in this episode. But I do want you to touch a little bit on about like how you became a triathlete and what an amazing example you are.
Yeah, I used to kick ass on the triathlon circuit as an Ironman triathlete and more. And I took the last 4 to 5 years off to focus on my food company, my brand. Because under this food company, you're going to have not only our 11,000 subscribers that continue to grow, but we have Service Line 2, which is our superfoods that's coming out at the end of this year. And also Service Line 3 and 4, these DBAs, which is our juice and smoothie bars, as well as our restaurants. And then you're going to have this amazing book that you're going to have access to that's going to have a open concept of amazing, non-judgmental wealth for someone that's either vegan or vegan curious or someone that's a meat eater. We have everything for you guys. We welcome you with love, with
That's
no
incredible.
judgment.
So it's like all your story encompassing, including helping people how to do it.
It's a beautiful guide. It's a beautiful experience. That's exactly what it is.
That's really cool. Yeah. And okay, segueing just a tiny bit, when did you become a triathlete through everything that you just told me that you've already done?
When I arrived to New York, yeah.
So then that's
New
when
York
you just
was
like kicked ass. You did all the things.
Tell you, New York concrete jungle does something to you for sure.
Wow. And how long were you a triathlete?
I want to say like 8 years. Yeah. Wow. 6 to 8 years.
I'll never forget your transformation photos, the before and after.
Yeah.
That was like, I remember those. I might even put it up right here, people who are watching.
For sure. Yeah.
Incredible.
Yeah.
You have so many important messages that I think are really inspiring for people and helpful for them to be aware of and start, being aware of others going forward and aware of yourself. And yeah, I'm just thankful that I got to have you come visit and have this conversation. I'm so honored to have it.
We I feel like there's so much we can talk about, but maybe we can get a part 2 with you in the States.
Let's do that.
Flying here was not fun for me.
Just being honest. You texted me when you were over the ocean. You're like, please pray for me.
Yeah. Just so everyone knows, like I said, I don't fear anything in life, but to me, it's just when you're at my timeline, it's just not natural to fly. I hate flying, and I've been on a lot of flights.
I don't like flying either.
I just do not like flying. It just doesn't feel natural to me at all. Yeah, I try my best to avoid it too. So,
me too.
So for me to come here to see you says a lot.
It says a lot to me. I acknowledge that. I realize that this was a big thing for you to come here, and I feel very thankful and humbled that you did. Yeah, I definitely love you.
Feel it's mutual. Thank you for the invite, and it's been a great experience staying with you and your family here. You guys have been great.
Awesome. Oh, thank you. Well, I'm sure we're going to continue this conversation that you guys won't get to hear late into the night tonight. Yeah. So great. Thank you so much for coming on. And I think we're going to end it here. Thanks everyone for listening.
Thank you. And thank you everybody for tuning in. Appreciate it.